If what Tucker Carlson says next is true, he's in deep trouble. But if it's not, what is going on?
So the other day I found out that the CIA is preparing some kind of criminal referral against me, a crime report to the Department of Justice on the basis of a supposed crime I committed. What's that crime? Well, talking to people in Iran before the war. They read my texts. So the crime under consideration apparently would be the Foreign Agent Act or something like that, acting as an agent of a foreign power. And I don't expect this to go anywhere. I'm not too worried about an actual criminal case against me for a bunch of reasons. One, I'm not an agent of a foreign power. Unlike a lot of people commenting on U.S. politics and global affairs, I have only one loyalty, and that's the United States, and have never acted against it. Its interests are the only interests I care about because I'm from here and I have a lot of kids. So that's not a concern. I've also never taken money from anybody. Don't need it, don't want it, and that's provable. And moreover, it's my job to talk to everybody all the time and try and figure out what's happening around the world. That's literally what I do for a living, and I'm not going to stop doing that, nor should I don't think. I'm also an American. I can talk to anybody. I have no secrets to divulge. So legally, I think the case is ludicrous, and I doubt it will even become a case. I'm bringing this up for a couple of reasons, though, and they're pretty obvious. One is that countries tend to become more authoritarian in wartime. It's just the nature of war. People are dying. The stakes are high. People's emotions have risen to a very high point, to a crescendo. And so there's much less tolerance for any kind of dissent in the homeland. The irony, of course, is the United States fights wars on behalf of freedom, but there's always less of it here in our country during war. So that's a...
You know, just a quick thought here as Tucker's moving through his amazing announcement. First thought is this is, I think, about the third or fourth time where Tucker's phones or electronics have been hacked. Famously, just a couple of years ago into the Biden regime, his texts showed up that were anti-Trump texts, or where he was fuming some emotion on text, showed up in the New York Times. And it's a mystery how that happened. He mentions another time, and I don't know if it's this interview, where it was a second time where his phones were tapped or something. And this is specific to FARA, and it sounds like it's specific to Iran. This is highly sensitive, obviously. And again, if it's true, he's in deep trouble. If it's not, it just leads me down this road of just asking more questions and not having answers to them as to, what does this mean when the government targets during wartime, to Tucker's point, a journalist? I mean, Tucker's been on the breaking and leading edge of the last handful of wars and instances across geopolitical instances that were explosive across the world. He famously interviewed Putin at a time when the Biden regime was not even interested in talking to Putin. So, Tucker made it happen. He's also he's had a series of interviews that have been, really kind of first in industry and probably what other investigative journalists should be doing. But this, I don't know. I don't know what to think of it. If there's a true FARA violation and Tucker's infracted on that, he's in deep trouble. What are the implications or the punishments with FARA? They could be pretty serious. And so let's continue listening to what he has to say here. But I just wanted to again interject. This is the third time at least that he's publicly admitted this has happened to him.
Widely recognized phenomenon, and it's likely to happen now too. Another point to make that is worth knowing is that the USIC, the intelligence agency, spy on Americans. Now, you probably knew that, and it's been revealed a lot, including by Julian Assange and Ed Snowden, both of whom are threatened with death for revealing it, but everyone knows. But it's probably a little more widespread than most people understand, and it's outrageous. There's no justification for your government, which you own, you're a shareholder in it, you pay for it, to be violating your privacy like this. But it happens all the time. And in fact, one of the reasons that CIA or people within CIA, just to be clear, it's a huge, sprawling, disconnected agency. What it does in a specific case doesn't represent what everybody in the building thinks, but there are some people who are mad at me for my views about Israel, and they have some latitude. And one of the reasons they pass on criminal complaints, in effect, to law enforcement is to justify warrants for spying on Americans. So that is an absolutely real thing. But the main reason they do it is to leak the existence of the investigation, such as it is, to the media, and then humiliate and terrify the subjects of this op. And that's, of course, happened to me repeatedly, many times, including in famously 2021 when I was still at Fox News and trying to set up an interview with Vladimir Putin. And the NSA, I heard from someone there, had grabbed my text messages with an American citizen and had leaked them to news outlets. Those texts were basically my attempts to set up an interview with the foreign head of state, and they leaked them to the New York Times in order to stop the interview, which they successfully did, by the way, and they admitted that they were spying on me. This is not a fantasy. It actually happened. They did it again 2 years later. My second attempt to get a Putin interview, I managed to get it anyway, and they've done it since. And so when you get a call from a reporter who knows the contents of your texts, it's pretty clear something's going on. None of this, in my judgment, as of right now, is a huge threat to me, so I'm not making this video to complain about it or whine or ask you to send me money because I'm under attack. I'm saying it because it's true, and you should know what your own government is doing, and you should know what the stakes are, and you should know that a lot of what happens in this country that affects outcomes happens behind the scenes. Some of it is legal, some of it is not, including what I'm describing now. But it has an effect. And the intel agencies, again, not everyone in the intel agencies, because there are decent, hardworking Americans who work in the intel agencies. They're Americans, just like there are decent, hardworking Americans who work at the DMV. But there are also people with agendas and grudges and no sense of restraint who are happy to misuse the power they have, granted them by our elaborate secrecy laws, to hurt fellow Americans for ideological reasons. That is entirely real. That's the story of Russiagate. And it's likely that things like that will begin to happen at greater scale now. So you should just know that going forward.
So again, I'm curious what you think of this. Do you think there's truth to the statement of what Tucker said? I mean, he said a lot in that clip, that the IC agencies have routinely spied on Americans, some legally, some efforts have been illegal. I think the thing that's confusing me a little bit is the timing of this, right? Obviously, there's a tremendous amount of propaganda from all sides on what's going on overseas and in the Middle East. There's been a tremendously difficult conversation and animated conversation on Israel and their role in what's going on in Iran, and their role with what's going on with Donald Trump's buy-in to make his move on Iran. And Tucker's been at the leading edge of that. So I don't think any of this is coincidental. I think we could agree, if we're fair-minded, on a couple things. The first thing is, none of us know. And we should probably not jump to conclusions here because we just don't know. And I'm not certain that Tucker knows. I think he probably knows more than what he's letting on about what's behind this, but I don't know if he knows exactly where this is going. If this is true, and let's just play this scenario out. And again, I'm curious, hit the comments. Let me know what you think here on this question. If this is true with Tucker and a completely inappropriate, nefarious, wrong, pick your adjective, discussion with Iranian assets before the war, that's a big deal. That is more than a big deal. That's something that should be prosecuted if there were sensitive and topical and timely discussion points in those conversations, meaning it's kind of past a journalistic question or interview, especially with the sensitivity of what's going on. The second thing, though, that I think we need to think through as we're taking our time and trying to not be jumpy on this is this. Clearly, the propaganda and the messaging is at an all-time high. And the topics and the individuals that Tucker has interviewed in the last couple weeks and the main messages of those interviews have been all very focused on Israel's role, Israel's desires, Donald Trump's, according to Tucker, lack of a spine and just kind of come along, getting along to come along with anything that Netanyahu wants him to do. So there's been a lot of beyond innuendo, just direct accusations by Tucker and his guests as to the Zionist argument and as to the Israel role in their end game and where they want to go. Keep in mind also, and it was a fascinating interview, Tucker just had a 2 or 3 hour interview with Mike Huckabee, who is the ambassador to Israel, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, the ex-governor of Arkansas, and a pastor. And some of the topics that were discussed in that were highly controversial, highly relevant, and really tough to get through. And my general take on that interview was Mike Huckabee seemed to struggle at times in trying to elucidate more of his argument and convince Tucker as to his thoughts. I'm not saying that Tucker won. I'm saying that I don't know if Mike Huckabee fully closed the loop on where he was trying to argue from with some of his positions. And then lastly, this just leads to the bigger question that Tucker right now is obviously target number one for anybody that disagrees with him. He's extremely visible. He has the biggest microphone. But what does this mean if this is not true? Is this an intimidation tactic? Does this mean that what he's saying is true, meaning that he's over the target with his clear lack of buy-in and agreement with the Iran war and specifically with Israel's role? These are big questions, and I think we all need to be adults in the room and have patience with the first point, have some curious questions as to the timing and propaganda messages behind this, and then thirdly, just have some deep thought and some significant thought without name calling as to what this means if this is not true, and what this means for our media, for Tucker now that he's an independent journalist, when a potential intimidation tactic is thrown his way that could be costly. Could be very costly legally. Certainly, meaning if it's not true, it could still tie him up. If it's true, it could be very costly personally. Let me know your thoughts. I think this is a timely conversation and a good set of questions for all of us to dialogue in down in the comments. So be active. Let me know. If you've yet to subscribe to America First Alerts, please do so. We have news stories just like this and discussion like this every day where we learn from each other and where we interact with each other. That's ultimately how adults in the room should be going through some of these big topics and these big debates without name calling, without all this other first grader crap. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, I think we can all agree the country itself, obviously America, is more than worth fighting for, but also the points and the decisions of our leaders and the messaging from our government and the America First principles are worth fighting for as well, and to educate each other on those. So get active in the comments again. If you haven't subscribed, hit the like button, and we'll see you in the next video.
We won! Okay, let's go.